DOS23 here. In today's knife therapy, we have the PMP Berserker. This knife comes in 4 different variations besides the one you see here. This is just a plain bead blasted variation, and they have them in all PVD blacked out with some anodizing. They have it in a flame titanium, and I'm not sure, I can't remember the other one, but let's get the specs out of the way real quick so you have an idea of the size of this beast. It's a 8.9 inch overall length, 3.87 inch blade, grip area from the back of the flipper to right here of 3.7 inches, or if you go all the way to the back, it's 4.2 inches. A handle scale thickness of 0.58, so it's got a little extra thickness to it than your average knife. And the closed width in the pocket from here to here is 1.7 inches. And the blade stock thickness is coming in at a whopping 0.16 inches or 4 millimeters. So it's a stout overall design. Now this obviously isn't something that I normally review, but I find joy in these, big beefy monstrosities. And PMP is known for their overbuilt tough folders. And that is exactly what we have here. And I'm going to review it as such. I'm not going to review it as a dainty EDC knife or a super slicer knife. That's just not this design, and that's perfectly okay. So let's take a look. We have this nice polarizing tanto blade. I mean, a whopping tanto. Nice thick stock there. It's got dual fullers on it, and you got a lot going on. Then you have this top swedge, so it gives it an interesting look. You also have the flats here and your 2 grinds for your tanto. Even though you have this wedge kind of thinning it out a little bit, you still have a beefy tip that should be able to handle some heavier use. This particular one has a nice stone wash finish on it. I think it looks good. You do have a row of jimping here that definitely grips the thumb even with gloves on. I found it was nice and locked in whenever I needed to. And, maybe pushing really hard, it's a little uncomfortable with non-gloved hands, but not the worst for sure. You do have a sharpening choil. I like the way they did that, so you will have some sharpening life, and you could always make this bigger if you needed to. The blade steel on this one is Bowler M390, as you can see right there. And then that's the only markings on the blade, the PMP Berserker. One thing that I noticed when I was cutting is that they put this at like a little curved angle, so you can choke up on there. You just got to be careful. But if you want to choke up on there to get right up to that edge, you can do it as well. Now, these 2 grinds are flat grinds. The Tanto is a flat grind. This is a flat grind. It doesn't go up super high, so it's going to be rather thick behind the edge, for that overbuilt tactical style knife. So why don't we find out how that performs? Knife came to me pretty sharp, and even though this isn't, the intended purpose, like as an EDC task, you can get some of them done. It was slicing actually fairly well because it's got a heavier blade, so it's basically just falling through it. Not so bad here. We'll have to wait and see how it handles some of the thicker materials or the more abrasive materials. Now here we're basically just testing the ergos because this is definitely not the knife I'd be grabbing to do this kind of work with. But no hot spots that I noticed. The nice wide, thicker handle was pretty comfortable in hand. I was just trying different grips, and of course the hammer grip, I felt like I had the most power. Just trying to get a little bit more controlled with my finger on top with the saber grip. Definitely, you can feel that thicker grind, no doubt. But it gets it done, and like I said, no hot spots. That's really what I'm testing for here. Now this is where I really felt that thickness and that edge, trying to use that Tanto section just to do the cutting. It would have been a lot easier to do the cutting if I would have just dragged that tip through there, but like I'm doing right now, I just wanted to see how, how it tried to cut through there. That leather kind of collapses on itself, making it pretty difficult. Now stuff like this, it was just fine. It was a little bit harder to get these cuts started into this rubber because it's another material that kind of collapses on that apex. And as you can see, I'm trying different parts of the grind. I was trying to use that secondary tip on the Tanto first, and then using that front portion. It's getting through this pretty well. And this right here, you can see, hopefully you can see that it's kind of frayed. It's kind of tearing it because this is compressed. That corner cardboard is compressed. It's a lot denser material, and it did more of tearing. Now, it still had a good edge because it was cutting through this denim cleanly. It wasn't feeling like it was dragging, therefore it had some bite to it. So not bad, you know, for the type of knife it is. Now this is definitely another type of cutting that this knife's not going to really excel at because it has a thick edge bevel, plus it's thick behind the edge, more made for, you know, impact type cutting. But you could do this in a pinch, definitely. Found that, you know, that forward portion by the Tanto and then that secondary to get it started was probably my easiest. I was using the extra heft to that blade, that, you know, weight to kind of force it down into it. We ended up getting 25 cuts with it, and wasn't the funnest to cut with just because I don't really like doing this testing with Tantos unless you have a nice thin Tanto where you can use that secondary point to get that started, or use the actual Tanto area to do the actual cutting. But here it's pretty robust, pretty thick, but we get through it. Now, since this is an overbuilt hard use knife, I figured we'd kind of test out that Tanto tip just to see how well it stabs, and you know, make sure it's not fragile in any area, make sure that tip doesn't easily break off or anything. And I think it penetrated well. I wasn't, you know, going full force into it, but I think it did just fine. Say behind that handle where it's rounded is very comfortable, and I felt really locked in. I could have exerted a lot more force into here without sliding up on that handle any. So definitely comfortable, well done on the grip in the back. Now we're gonna just play around this aluminum little mailbox, and that tip just felt so sharp. I wanted to see how easily it penetrated, and of course it made it feel like it was paper going into there. And just, you know, some extra fun testing with this knife. I know it's not really an EDC style knife, which you could EDC it if you wanted, but it's more, you know, somebody who needs a heavy duty tactical style knife. So just playing around, and boy, did it do a great job. No problems. Now it did kind of dull out the very tip, but that's understandable. Now we're gonna try to chop through these 3 copper wires. Don't do this with your knife. It probably will void your warranty, but I do it so you just don't need to do it. It takes 3 whacks, and it gets through it and goes straight through. Really very minimal damage done to the knife. I mean, literally a small little roll, and I find that acceptable. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed that cutting. I enjoyed making it because it was kind of fun. Now let's test this portion of the edge, because I did a lot of cutting there and going through some of that aluminum stuff. Let's see how it is now. Yeah, it's got a small hang up, but, you know, still, I'd call that a pretty good edge. Let's see. Okay, there. Yeah, it's got a few small little rolls, or nothing major there. I think there's a little glint of light, probably where I chopped through those wires, but I'd say that's a-okay. Now let's check out the action and deployment of this knife. It is a flipper. It does have a jimping on that flipper. That does a great job. It's canted back some, so well-designed flipper. As you can see, the front of that flipper is right in front of that pivot, so this thing rockets out. Comes out with authority. It's riding on ceramic bearings with a ceramic detent ball. Very smooth action. Nice. All the PMP knives I've ever gotten, I think I own 4 now, and they all have very snappy and smooth action. Very nice. Now let's close it up and take a look at the handle scale area. Your hardware, your pivot is just countersunk flush on this side, and the actual Torx is on this side with a Torx T8. and Torx T8 body screws. Very nice screws too. Look how crisp those are. Very, very nicely done. You have an all titanium frame, massive chunks of titanium that are contoured. You have this nice chamfer going all the way around. Nice little chamfer on both sides of that for aesthetics. Happy that they didn't put a lanyard hole in here. Keeps it nice and clean looking. Guess if you want to put a lanyard, you could tie it to this back portion right there. I'm guessing that's what that's for. You do have a titanium backspacer that comes up about halfway up the scales and then wraps around right here. Very nice. You have a milled titanium pocket clip that is blind screwed, just meaning it's screwed from the inside, so you don't have any screws on that on the outside showing. I think that looks nice. They did put the lock relief cut on the outside. That would have looked a lot cleaner with it on the inside, but whatever. Now let's check this out in the pocket. Now the pocket clip is tip up right hand carry only, and there's not a ton of room underneath there, but I didn't have any problems with it going in and out of my jeans. It sits, you know, fairly deep in there, not much sticking out, but you're definitely going to feel you have a knife in the pocket. This is a pretty chunky knife. Now let's take a look at the inside. You do have skeletonization in there to kind of help relieve that weight a little bit, and on the show side scale as well. Let's put this on the scale and see how much it weighs. First off, in grams, 214.9 grams and 7.58 ounces. So it's definitely a chunky knife, but I think you know that going into this. Now let's open it up and take a look at the lockup. Lockup is sitting, I'd say, at around 30% or so. No play up or down whatsoever, none side to side. This thing's got a bank vault lockup, and you saw me beating on the top of it, knocking it through those wires, and it did nothing to the lock, and it still locks up great. So call that a win. Now, you do have this little cutout right here that allows that lock to stick up a little bit further. Plus, you have a good bit of room to stick your finger in there. So I find it pretty easy to disengage that lock bar. And pretty comfortable because of these chamfers on both sides as well, like I said, and that sticking up a little bit. Does have a lock bar insert that they screwed from the inside, I'm guessing, to keep it nice and clean on this side. I think that looks nice, and if you ever did have a problem with your lock, they could potentially just change that out for you. Now for some quick size comparisons, we have the PMP Smilodon. Its overall length is a little bit longer, but you have about the same blade length on these two. And then you have the TM River Wolf, I think it's called. These are pretty close in overall length. The Berserker is just a little bit longer in overall length. Next up, we have the Best Tech Fairchild and the Ontario Rat Model 1. The Fairchild is about identical in overall length. You have more cutting edge on the Berserker, and the Ontario Rat 1 is a little bit shorter in overall length. And lastly, we have the Artisan or CJRB Proponent and the Spyderco PM2. The Proponent is as chunky, but it's a little bit shorter, and of course, the PM2 is a good bit shorter. Now for my nitpicks and complaints, I could have done without that. Now it is pretty subdued, so they didn't make it black to where it sticks out that much, so I'm okay with it. Of course, I would have liked maybe a hollow grind, but I think they already did a version of the Berserker with a hollow grind here, so you know, whatever. It's an overbuilt knife, so I get it. So it can't really, it's just a nitpick. But overall, I really enjoyed using the knife. It is a beefy knife, and if that's something you enjoy, I think you'd really like this one. I'm going to look around and see if any of these are available, because if you are familiar with PMP Knives, they do small runs and then they move on to the next one. I'm going to see if I can find any of these available. If they are available, I will link them down in the description. And yeah, let me know what y'all think about the testing I did with it and what y'all thought about the video. All right, guys and girls, I hope everybody's having an absolute amazing day. I'm going to see y'all on the next one. Peace.